Clinical Excellence. My name is Dustin Jones, one of the faculty within the Older Adult Division, MMOA or Modern Management of the Older Adult. Today is Wednesday. We're going to talk about all things older adults. In particular, we're going to talk about the hardest transition in healthcare, the most difficult transition, why that is, and then what each of us can do about this very, very challenging, difficult transition. Before we get into the goods, I want to mention a few things coming up in the world of MMOA or Modern Management of the Older Adult. We have our online Essential Foundations course firing up April 26th. That's shaping up to be a solid cohort. If you're wanting to get into that, I would do that sooner than later. Those seats go relatively quickly, especially as we approach that date. We have our Advanced Concepts online course that's starting May 4th, and then we're going to be out on the road all over the place the next few months. Just the next couple of weekends, we're going to be in Aiken, South Carolina, April 15th and 16th, Oviedo, Florida, April 22nd and 23rd, and then we'll be in Rogers, Arkansas that same weekend as well, April 22nd and 23rd. All right, let's get into this. This is a topic that has been on my mind more and more and more as I find myself in the context of fitness and wellness. I work at Stronger Life, which is a fitness center for folks over 55. And it's been very interesting to kind of be in this context and just have experience at multiple levels of kind of the healthcare system and to see what happens as folks transition and navigate this crazy, medical complex that we have. But these transitions are really difficult, right? Like regardless of where you're coming from, if you go into the hospital, from the home to the hospital, from the hospital to maybe inpatient rehab, from an inpatient rehab to something like a skilled nursing facility, then to home health, then maybe to outpatient, and then who knows after outpatient, right? These are all very difficult transitions. And there's a lot of folks that study this stuff to see what can we do to smooth these transitions out. There are a lot of issues, a lot of miscommunication, a lot of balls that get dropped. A lot of mismatched expectations, a lot of damage can be done in these transitions, and they can really influence the outcomes that you care about. Something that happened maybe months before you're working with someone actually can influence the outcomes that you are getting with that patient. So we want to be very aware of the difficulty of these transitions, especially for those new patients that you have, to understand what they have gone through. Likely through the medical meat grinder, if you will, the very difficult, challenging medical system that we have. So there's all kinds of different transitions, right? But what I want to make the argument for is one of the most challenging ones, and maybe the hardest one for folks, is the transition from physical therapy to fitness. From physical therapy to fitness. Now, many of us, I think many folks that listen to this podcast are going to perceive fitness to still be in the healthcare system. I think that's what makes this group of humans very special. Most folks don't, but we're going to clump it into healthcare. But it is a very, very difficult transition. Let's go through some key points of why that is the case, and then what we can do about this. Because many of us are pushing people towards the land of fitness, right? Jeff Moore, CEO of ICE, has given us some marching orders that we manage symptoms to ultimately maximize fitness. That is our end game. How do we make sure that actually happens? So here are some of the difficulties that many of these folks face. And this is front and center for me because Stronger Life just opened up our new facility. We had an open house last night. We had tons of new members that have joined that have not started Stronger Life yet. And I had probably no less than 35 to 40 conversations with folks about this transition. Many of them have come from physical therapy. They've had a surgery. They've had some type of injury. Local PT here in Lexington that knows about says, hey, I want you to continue on with Stronger Life. And we had these very interesting conversations that bring up a lot of really good points. So the first big barrier for a lot of these folks is the fear that they have on board. And I don't think we truly grasp the difficult situation that many of folks find themselves in. Many of them have had issues, back pain, knee pain, whatever, has been plaguing them, sometimes for decades, right? Think about what that does to your psyche, to your confidence, to your perception of what your body can handle, right? You go from the medical system where you've got these, quote unquote, highly trained professionals that are taking care of you in the context of healthcare. And then you go out into the context of fitness, which many people perceive to be hardcore, to be intense, to be dangerous, right? If I move a certain way, if I move too hard, I'm going to hurt myself. That is a predominant thought for so many folks as they enter the realm of exercise. So, what do we do about that, right? Think about some of the opportunities that we have in this area. I cannot tell you how many folks that we get at Stronger Life that have been given specific instructions of to never squat below 90, to never twist, to never bend forward, avoid excessive hyperextension was one that we got yesterday. And there may be some more, those claims may be warranted to some extent. But many of those restrictions are rather arbitrary, and many of those folks are actually able to do a lot of those things if dosed appropriately. And what that advice ultimately does is injects that nocebo that influences them in a negative manner, that creates this fear that ultimately leads to these fear avoidance behaviors to where these folks are scared to death to move and to test their limits. They are absolutely scared to death. So for us, what do? We need to promote resilience. We need to show people what their true limits are and not give them the arbitrary don't bend, twist, lift, hyperextend, all that garbage. Because it's absolutely dangerous to say that to someone without actually knowing if that's the case. What are their true limits? We need to discover that in the context of a controlled situation that we can manage, right? Especially managing symptom behavior. And we can promote resilience and confidence in what their true limits are versus giving them these arbitrary restrictions. That stuff drives me crazy. So that's the first one. The fear is massive with a lot of these folks. We need to promote resilience in our particular setting. You're not going to know that if you don't know what their true limits are. Let's avoid the arbitrary restrictions that we're giving folks. It does a lot of harm, and we're dealing with this every day in the context of Stronger Life, in the context of fitness. So that's the first one. Second one, we have to play the long game. This one's really tough, especially if you've ever taken an MMOA course. We talk a lot about the urgency of a lot of the situations that our folks find themselves in, especially if they're one rep max living. One rep max living is when folks are giving it their all for so many common activities of daily living. They're giving max efforts, and their max capacity is near the demand of a lot of common activities. They're giving a ton of effort all throughout their day. We need to get them as resilient as possible. The way to do that is increase their capacity. We don't have any time to waste. However, if we hit the ground too hard, go out too hot, these folks that have a lot of fear on board, that are very concerned about an exercise routine, if we hit the ground running too fast and create DOMS, for example, or a potential flare-up, we have a big hole to climb out of. So what we really need to think about is playing the long game and implement the useful strategy of intentional underdosage, which is counterintuitive, right? We hammer so hard on the danger of underdosage, but 9 times out of 10, if you ever spend any time with an MOA faculty, the first visit is going to look very easy, more than likely. It's likely going to be intentionally underdosed, especially if folks have relatively low levels of physical activity, a lot of fear on board. We're going to start relatively easy, but we don't stay there. That's the kicker. So intentional underdosage. This one, especially for us at Stronger Life, has been a big learning curve where we need to think about the long game. Yes, I know Betty can lift 50 pounds off the ground, but she doesn't know that right now. Betty, we're going to start with the 10-pounder. And it can be hard. It can be really hard. Like, man, I'm wasting time, but we're not. We're establishing that rapport, building that therapeutic alliance, and even giving ourselves the opportunity in the future to be able to give Betty that 50-pound kettlebell, barbell, dumbbell, whatever it may be. So first one is we got to acknowledge the fear, and we want to promote resilience. The second one is we need to be very thoughtful of playing that long game. We need to have intentional underdosage, because oftentimes folks will go out way too hot, and that just ultimately makes them quit or not come back or think, oh, I can't handle this exercise stuff. It's too much for me. Third one is the communication piece. This is a very challenging thing in every transition of healthcare. But I would argue that this, from physical therapy, rehab to fitness, is one of the more challenging ones. Because if you think about it, so many of the other transitions are usually rehab to rehab, right? Many of the folks ultimately at their core have had the same training. You are discharging as a PT to another PT. You speak the same language. You know what a lot of the terminology is. You may not agree with that person and what they did in their plan of care and all that stuff, but you all have had the same training. right? Then we go from, let's say, outpatient physical therapy to a fitness professional. And the fitness industry has a lot of issues, just like the rehabilitation industry. And we see a ton of variability in fitness professionals, just like we do in physical therapy, right? But a lot of fitness professionals don't get a lot of that foundational education that you all have the luxury of having, of being able to understand anatomy, for example, of understanding some of these different health complications, of understanding a lot about your patient that from the medical side, that fitness professional may not know. Now, there are a lot of fitness pros that understand those things very well. And I would argue more so than a lot of physical therapists I know. But we need to be aware of that mismatch, and we need to be able to clearly communicate the limits of that patient, of any guidance that you may want to give, of particular things that they may want to avoid, but do it in an informed manner and not just pull something out of your butt. Actually test these folks' limits to be able to give them their precautions, if you will, that are actually based on data and not assumptions. And if we're able to communicate that well to these fitness professionals, you have given them such a beautiful framework to hit the ground, quote unquote, running, but in a very informed manner, that they're going to be able to intentionally underdose. They're going to be able to really gradually progress things to the point where that former patient is going to be able to continue towards that land of fitness for a long period of time. That is absolutely huge. And I cannot communicate that enough. What I'm seeing now in Stronger Life is I'm seeing it done in a very poor manner. I'm seeing notes from physicians and local physical therapists that are just giving these arbitrary recommendations and restrictions and not really setting up the fitness professional for success. Hardest transition, y'all, I think, is from physical therapy to fitness. Think about the fear that's on board with those folks. Are you contributing to that fear, or are you promoting resilience? That deserves some honest reflection, some very honest reflection. Those random precautions and restrictions that you're giving, is that informed by evidence, or is that informed by assumptions? You need to check yourself. We also need to understand, what does that gradual progression look like for that person to be able to continue this for the long road? Oftentimes it looks like intentional underdosage. And if that is the game, if that's the tactic, we need to be able to communicate that to our fitness professionals, to that local resource in the community, or someone that you may be working with, to be able to communicate that so that transition is smooth and you equip that fitness professional to do their thing, to hit the ground running and take this person to the land of fitness. Let me know your thoughts, y'all. I know we got some ICU therapists on here that would have a strong argument of why fitness is not the hardest transition, but I want to hear your thoughts. Let's engage in the comments on YouTube, on Instagram. We appreciate y'all. You have a lovely rest of your Wednesday. I forgot another announcement. Ernie, we're doing Ernie tonight, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The MMOA crew and some other ICE faculty are getting together to honor Ernie Perrault. At 99 years young, this guy is an absolute legend. He passed away a couple years ago, but embodies all things old, not weak. So every first week of April, we get on Zoom and we throw down in a 9-minute AMRAP of some of Ernie's favorite exercises. It's going to be awesome. There's going to be a Zoom link in the Hump Day Hustle email, and you'll see a social media post on the ICE account later. 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight, April 5th. Would love to see y'all. All right. Have a good rest of your day. I'll talk to y'all soon.